The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Subscribe to the First and 12 podcast. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio.
Hey everybody, let's get it going. It is First and 12 right here, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM. I'm normally on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone during the week. That's why sometimes I get the signals mixed up. Mitch Harper, he doesn't get the signals mixed up ever, but he's not in the building at the moment, and so he's in Kansas City taking in some Big 12 media days for basketball. Then he's going to round out the week going to the Iowa State game. Mitch, what's going on, man? Everything good?
Doing good, Alex. Yeah, I just got done with Big 12 basketball media day one earlier today. But what's nice, though, about football season is it still works its way into basketball media day, and you'll hear some of Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, his commentary from earlier today about college football playoff expansion and the thoughts of the Big 12 conference on that. But, yeah, Kansas City's a good time out here in the Big 12. They love the Big 12 here in KC. There's stores nearby the T-Mobile Center with Big 12 gear. The Big 12 even gave me a Big 12 hat, so
no, you're
I'm
one of the
decked out in
referees
Big
now.
12 gear.
You're looking like one of the referees now.
Yes, I am.
We've been coveting those hats that the refs have been wearing during these Big 12 games, man. How come? Listen, I'll Venmo you. Get me a Big 12 referee hat, and that while you're there, so I can be a part of this, man. So
I'll find a way to make it happen.
All
I
right.
mean, that's why I had to work in a couple weeks ago on the show the New Era sponsorship,
Of course.
right? That's why I had to get that in there.
Well, we've got lots going on. First and 12, of course, is always part of our Football Tuesdays that we have ready for you. Again, you just heard Mitch Harper and Cougar Tracks the last 30 minutes, and then we're going to get you all the way up till 9 o'clock, and then you've got BYU football with Kalani Sitake. So we've got you covered top to bottom, and we've got you all over the place. When it comes to the Big 12, it's a disaster of a conference. And by that, I mean it's one of the most exciting conferences in all of the land of college football. So let's get things started off here in segment one. It is our First and 12 game of the week.
The big time Big 12 game of the week on First and 12.
Where else would we go other than the rivalry game? BYU took down Utah 24-21. BYU's third consecutive victory in this rivalry. The first time that's happened, Alex, since 1992. It's
That's
hard to
wild.
believe it had been that long since BYU got three straight over the Utes, but feels like a little bit of a changing of the guard in the state where BYU is planting its flag as the top program in this state. It wasn't always pretty for BYU, but you know they were the more physical football team, and they took care of business and maintained their undefeated season.
Yeah, and you and I sit by each other in the press box, then we sit by each other down in the press room in the post game, and so what's interesting about all that is that this is actually the first time we get to really kind of get our thoughts from one another on this game, and it has to be a wild ending, right? It has to be a wild finish to these games. And I was standing in the south end zone at the very end of the game. I was actually standing by one of our Utah colleagues, Stevenson Sylvester, who does radio for the Utah side of things. I played linebacker at Utah, and I'll tell you, we're sitting down there, and it was some dicey moments for that student section after that touchdown was scored there at the end. The thing that I got out of this game, though, after everything settled and BYU ends up with their third straight win, is I think that every game we found out a little bit more about BYU as we go along here. And Utah, it's interesting because I think that we're finding out less about Utah. It's a weird dynamic because Utah's been the steady program, right? Not just in getting wins in this. I mean, Kyle Whittingham brought it up in his postgame, right? He goes, look, we've won nine of these in a row, so losing 3 of these in a row, yeah, it's a bummer, but I'm way ahead on the ledger is kind of the way he put it, right? and it's true. The guy's a legend up at Utah. But the last 3 years, Utah has not been able to sneak it past BYU. I'm not sure what it is that BYU has learned to finally kind of get over that hump because it doesn't feel as much like – it feels like BYU has snuck wins away from Utah in the past years, and that's how they've gotten it. But now it feels like they're the better team and, at least for the moment, the better program between the two schools.
Kalani's, got BYU in a great place to where they've kind of modeled their program a little bit after Utah, quite a bit actually.
Yeah.
And the physicality of BYU, I think, shined in this one. And because it's not very often in this series that BYU, would get 200 yards on the ground against Utah. And I know Utah got a lot of yards in this game, and we'll hit on that. But BYU to get 202 on the ground, rushing yards, I thought that was huge because this is what BYU is built on, their physicality and running the football offensively. That's what they want to turn to. And when you can get 200 yards consistently, even against a good defense like Utah, BYU has shown that they can win really any game in this conference because they have so much faith and so much trust in that ground attack with L.J. Martin and Bear Bachmeier. Bear had a more reasonable rush total against Utah, only 11 carries compared to the 22 he had against Arizona a few weeks back. But BYU's ground attack is for real, and I think their defense with the return of Jack Kelly back in the lineup, that was a game changer. And even Isaiah Glasgow, though he got banged up in the first half, and he didn't seem anywhere close to full strength in the second half. But having Jack out there dealing with that shoulder injury, that was a game changer, I think, for BYU, too, to have him back in the lineup. And but by all accounts, though, just BYU, they've done this, humble and hungry approach that Kalani loves, love and learn, all that. It's just working, and it seems like it's carrying over to each and every week where BYU now has won 18 of its last 20 games in a league that you feel like we can never predict week after week. BYU's becoming a predictable team, and that's something that's not very common in the Big 12.
After BYU played this very emotional game last year up at Utah, they, of course, took 2 losses in a row. That was brought up immediately after the game, of course, by Kalani Sitake. He brought that right up and said, hey, we lost this game right after this. We lost the week after. In fact, they lost the 2 weeks after because they went Kansas, and then they hosted Kansas, and that was a tough loss. And then they went to Arizona State. That was also a very emotional loss. And that essentially was their season when it came to what the postseason was going to be for them, because that wrapped up for everybody else. Well, BYU's not really ready for the college football playoff. That was arguable. But at this point now, it's interesting to see, Mitch, what BYU is going to try to do to turn around and correct the script from last year, which was massively emotional game against Utah, which it always is, and it came down to the wire like it always does. And they're going to try to figure out how to get a win this week. Going to Ames to play Iowa State is a wild way to follow that thing up, and it just is followed up again by a bye week, but more difficult schedule along the way for BYU, I think, than any other team in the Big 12. But every little test seems to be getting a little bit more difficult for Bear Bachmeier and this BYU offense that everybody was waiting to see what they'd look like, and they keep passing him. So he keeps progressing as a quarterback. Now, L.J. Martin, Bear is easy to bring up. He won his 4th Freshman of the Week honors in a row and 5th overall for the season. I think that the Big 12 at this point is like, oh, man, we just don't have that many freshmen to be able to give this award to. I mean, I don't know, Mitch. Have you asked him what he gets? Does he get like a little miniature, like it's like the old, Michael Scott, the awards that they would do in the office? Is it like a Brett Yore marquee? Every month or every week you get a little mini statue of the commissioner you put on your desk? I don't know how it works, but the guy just keeps turning it out. And somebody who we quietly talked about, even though he's one of the best running backs in the entire league, is L.J. Martin was one of those guys that was key to that victory for BYU, to keep that ground game consistent, get those those first downs, but not only that, get them into second and third and short situations. And I thought overall they had a great game plan, and their defense did just enough to be able to keep Utah without scoring as many points in that red zone. And it helped that Kyle Whittingham just kept going for it on 4th down, and they didn't convert.
I'm not sure what Bear gets for these weekly honors, but I am sure that L.J. Martin is the best running back in the Big 12. He has been outstanding for BYU this season. And I'm also sure, too, that Devin Dampier is regressing for Utah. He looked banged up in that second half.
Massively.
And you saw Ficklin in the second half, Bird Ficklin, the backup quarterback, getting a lot of running the football in that second half. But Dampier clearly did not look anywhere close to full strength. And you kind of wondered, too, if it's going back to what Utah was dealing with in that Texas Tech week, where Dampier was banged up. And is this a situation where, oh no, the season is tied to the health of a quarterback, and if he's not at full strength, does this season go in the tank for Utah? Because like BYU last year, Utah also spiraled a bit after that BYU game, losing to Colorado and then they kind of picked themselves up off the mat against UCF, but the season was lost at that point. They didn't have a bowl game to play for. So both of these teams got to fight the challenge of letdown because this game is emotionally draining, but I will say that I feel BYU creating a little bit of cushion in the fourth quarter. There were still some late heroics, obviously, and there was a field storming, but it seemed like it wasn't as late of a night as it was last year. I remember last year, guys were up until 6:30 in the morning, including even the media. There was just a late night for everyone involved, whereas this one seemed kind of more business as usual in terms of just the schedule and what happened after the game. But it was a memorable night for BYU, and I think all of Cougar fans out there, they're probably thrilled with the trajectory of the program because when you get these rivalry wins, it just kind of validates what you think you're building, and now you got to take it to a higher level and try to go chase a Big 12 title. So it was a huge win for BYU.
Yeah, Utah did mention this week that they are looking to see if Devin Dampier is going to be able to go. That'll be interesting to see what these injury reports over the rest of the week are going to give us on that one because they said, hey, Bert Ficklin, we feel really, really good about him if he does have to take over at least for a week for Devin Dampier, who, that ankle was definitely re-injured again, it looked like, in that game against BYU. Let's take our first break of the evening on 1st and 12. We'll come right back. We've got more to go right around the corner. We have our 1st and 12 headlines from a packed week, again, of a wild conference weekend in the Big 12. Mitch, Harper, Alex, Kirry. It is 1st and 12 right here on KSL News Radio.